Pokemon Legends EA is coming out this year, and with it, there will be the reintroduction of Mega Evolution into the franchise. First time we've seen Mega Evolution since 2018's Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, so it's been 7 years. And then not only that, but this could mean that Mega Evolution is, back for a while. We could see Mega Evolution be in the Gen 10 games, and maybe even beyond that. We already know it's coming to Pokemon Champions as well. With this, there is the idea that there could be new Mega Evolutions, not just in Pokemon Legends EA, but in potential Legends EA DLC, in Gen 10, maybe even in Champions, and beyond. Welcome back to the post where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about some Pokemon that seem to be primed for a Mega Evolution. Now, how do we know this? Well, there's basically this theory that I actually came up with way back in 2022? 2022? Wow, that was such a long time ago. But anyways, this theory is basically that Mega Evolution is using primal DNA to evolve a Pokemon further. So latent DNA that still exists in the Pokemon but isn't exactly showing up in its design or its traits, but it's still there in its coding, and it's using this, it's pulling from this to evolve further when it Mega Evolves. There's a whole video on this that you can check out that I did back in 2022. But to basically recap it a little bit, some proof of this is that we have Roaring Moon, which is a seemingly past version of Salamence, looking incredibly similar to Mega Salamence, perhaps indicating that Salamence is pulling from its primal DNA that it has left over from Roaring Moon to evolve it further into Mega Salamence. And another example is Aerodactyl, with Mega Aerodactyl having a dex entry where it talks about how it looks closer to the actual Aerodactyl that used to exist in prehistoric times, indicating that the fossil restoration process for Aerodactyl alters it, but Mega Evolution allows Aerodactyl to access that primal DNA it still has from when it used to actually roam the Earth naturally, and uses that to evolve it further into something that looks closer to how it did. There's other great examples that seem to back up this theory, but again, watch that full video for that. Today, we're just going to be using that theory, looking at some Pokemon that really could get some Mega Evolutions in the future. So first off, there are the fossil Pokemon. Like I said, with Aerodactyl, we seemingly get this indication that fossil Pokemon are not really natural, and that the fossil restoration process alter these Pokemon slightly. This has long been a theory, but yeah, so if we're looking at this and we're saying that Aerodactyl is able to Mega Evolve into something closer to it, perhaps all of these fossil Pokemons could Mega Evolve into something more closely to what they used to look like in prehistoric times. With that, they could even pick up some traits from back then, like maybe some typings that no longer exist. Like the first one I always think of is perhaps a Mega Rampardos could lean into that whole brain thing and how Zen Headbutt was kind of treated when Cranidos was introduced as its signature move, and perhaps could be a rock psychic type. Other Pokemon like Kabutops potentially being part bug type, replacing its rock or its water typing with the bug typing, and Pokemon like Armaldo and Cradily, who don't have the water type but are aquatic animals, perhaps picking up that water type when it Mega Evolves, since that's how they lived back in prehistoric times. Also, Aurorus could get the electric typing from this, as I've done a whole video on how I think Aurorus could in fact be like a secretly electric type Pokemon, but that one I'd say is less likely than the other ones I've named. Now that said, this would not apply to all the fossils. The Galar fossils are a little bit different because, these aren't just restored, these are mix and matched and then restored. So they kind of get a little Frankenstein, so I'm not sure that they could access latent DNA because these Pokemon don't really exist. They have parts of them that do, so maybe they could access those parts, but I don't know how that would work. It would be tricky. And also too, if you just look at the designs of these Pokemon, they seemingly are kind of restored perfectly, other than the whole Frankenstein component. They don't seem to have any rocky features. So yeah, I'm thinking that the Galar fossils would be kind of not subject to this, but perhaps the Pokemon that they are based on, like the Pokemon that we're mix and matching here would have Mega Evolutions. Then there's any Pokemon with a past paradox. We talked about how with Salamence, it's able to Mega Evolve using latent DNA from Roaring Moon. So hypothetically, any Pokemon with a past paradox would also potentially be able to do this. And this would also apply to the Pokemon who has a member of its evolutionary line having a paradox Pokemon. So this would be Magnezone, Wigglytuff, Volcarona, Mismagius. There would be Donphan and Cyclizar even, and also Amoonguss. All of these are perfectly plausible candidates to get a Mega Evolution since they have these past versions of themselves that they can pull from. The standouts here would be Donphan and Mismagius, as these are the only mono-type ones, so perhaps you could see Donphan pick up the fighting type when it Mega Evolves, and maybe Mismagius would pick up the fairy type when it Mega Evolves. Now you might notice that I left off 3 past Paradox Pokemon, Walking Wake, Gouging Fire, and Raging Bolt, the paradoxes of the legendary beasts, and I did do that intentionally because given what we know about the legendary beasts and their origins, they were restored from these Pokemon by Ho-Oh, and, you know, it doesn't seem like these Pokemon were Walking Wake, Gouging Fire, and Raging Bolt. In fact, a lot of people think that they were a past version or perhaps the modern version of Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon. So I omitted these as these paradoxes seem like they truly are from just an alternate reality where this is how these Pokemon were restored instead of being restored to look like this. That said, my third choice would be the Beasts. Yes, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune I could see having Mega Evolutions. If they are indeed from the evolutions, then that DNA might still be there, and they could perhaps Mega Evolve to have traits of Vaporeon, Flareon, and Jolteon respectively. Or maybe even more crazy, they get traits of Eevee, and because of that can access other evolutionary members' traits. Imagine a Raikou with some rings on it, and it's an electric dark type, taking some DNA from Umbreon, and maybe even a Suicune that has some ribbons, those feelers on it kind of become more like Sylveon, so it becomes a water fairy type. And Entei kind of gets more associated with the sun and gets some psychic powers from it, getting that from Espeon, becoming a fire and psychic type. All of this is, again, like purely speculation. We don't know that the evolutions were what were restored into Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, but I am a believer in that theory, if for nothing else, because it's fun. And so, yeah, that just would be really cool, the idea of them taking that to evolve further with Mega Evolution. Then we have Goodra. So we know that Goodra once had a shell to protect itself. The Hisuian form of Goodra has this. You see Goodra able to kind of go inside its shell to protect itself. And now, look, you might say, why are you saying Goodra, not all the Hisuian Pokemon? And that's because I believe that a lot of the Hisuian Pokemon are not actually past forms of the Pokemon and are a result of the environment, not a result of the time period, right? Like, for example, the Braviary in Hisui has the Psychic Flying type, which, you know, seems a little weird because Rufflet still has normal flying, and that indicates to me that the normal flying Unnovan Braviary is actually the original Braviary, and this Braviary is a product of environment, not the original Braviary. And then also there are some dex entries in Hisui that kind of reference that there are other forms, like with Quillfish, I believe there's a dex entry that references that this is a form of Quillfish. And so because of that, it seems that this is a result of the area plus the time period and not being a result of like, oh, this is just an ancient form of this Pokemon. That said, with Hisuian Goodra, I do believe this is the original form of Goodra, because if you look at the design traits of the Gumi line, you can kind of see that indication. The Kalosian Sliggoo still has a little shell, not quite as big as it had when it was a Hisuian Sliggoo, but clearly that is carrying over from its past self. Whereas Kalosian Goodra, if you look at its tail, it does a little spiral, because used to, that tail was inside a spiral shell. So you can see in their designs the evolution of this Pokemon. So I imagine if Goodra did get a Mega Evolution, it would get armor, and it would become Dragon Steel type. Now, I don't think it would get a big ol' shell, because the whole thing about Kalosian Goodra is it's happy. It's not shy at all like its Hisuian counterpart. The idea is that it's come out of its shell. So I don't think it's going to go back into its shell. Instead, I imagine it would kind of take this armor, and instead we're evolving the Pokemon further, right? Not reverting it. So it would become actual like battle armor and be a bit more mobile on Goodra. This would also allow Kaloshi and Goodra to be much speedier, but maybe less physically bulky than Hisui and Goodra. Next up, we have Shiftry. So Shiftry, this one's kind of interesting because it's a legend. There are legends that Shiftry was once a bird Pokemon that was cursed. Now, since it's a legend, we don't know that this is true, but if it's true, then Shiftry could have a Mega Evolution that would allow it to pick up the Flying type, perhaps replacing its Grass type or its Dark type with it. Since it's cursed, I imagine they'd want to keep that, and it'll become Flying Dark. Then I imagine the little fan hands it have would become more winged, and, you know, it would get more of a bird look. I think that just makes sense for Shiftry, and it would be pretty cool, right? Then we have the Dunsparce. So this is one that I'd really like. I think everyone kind of wants this. So we're told in Dunsparce's Sword and Shield Dex entry that it is able to, in ancient times, it was able to fly through the skies. So perhaps a Dunsparce Mega Evolution would allow it to get greater wings and be soaring around the world, and this would be a normal flying type, which also kind of fits perfect in my opinion because Dunsparce is treated as like the mascot of Larry, and Larry is both a normal and flying type specialist, so it just really works in my opinion. So there you have it, guys. Those are a couple of Pokemon that I think are very plausible to get Mega Evolutions one day. There's evidence in games that they have an ancient version of themselves that they can pull DNA from to evolve further. So yeah, let me know what you think of this list. Let me know which of these you'd really like to see get a Mega Evolution soon. And let me know if you can think of more examples of this. I'd love to make more of this video if this video does well. And so on that note, like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell for notifications so I can see you're loving this video and I can make another one. And until next time, I will see all of you later.